Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov, and we are here today with JJ Carrell, Counterpoints. Connor, we are going to be talking about what's currently going on with the United States, with the protests that are currently going on right now, the anti-ICE protests, and we're going to figure out exactly whether this is a kind of a fifth column going on inside of the United States. We are maybe going to have some kind of retribution, some kind of rally, some kind of civil war. God, I hope not, but I don't know if these things are going to be at the present evolving more than they are now because of what's going on with Israel bombing Iran, whether there are certain fifth columnists that are in charge of the people who are leading a lot of these protests, and also whether the United States is going to turn into a kind of potential dictatorship just because maybe that's what it takes in order to fight whatever fifth columnists are currently entrenched inside of the United States. So I want to first go to JJ, and for those who don't know, the two people here, Counterpoints and JJ, they both come from a law enforcement military background. So Counterpoints is a United States veteran. And what branch were you in?
I did 4 years in the Marine Corps.
Marine Corps, there we go. And JJ, you come from a background of law enforcement when it comes to Border Patrol, but were you also a veteran as well?
I was not. Connor, where were you stationed? 29 Palms or?
I did pre-deployment training in 29 Palms, but I served from 2006 to 2010. Parris Island, Okinawa, 29 Palms, Iraq, Okinawa again, San Diego.
Okay, so you were at Camp Pendleton?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I did about 4 to 6 years at the Border Patrol station there, right at Camp Pendleton.
Physically, I obviously hate Californian politics, but one of the most physically beautiful places on the planet
ever. And Camp Pendleton is sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars of land that's worthless now because there's so much lead in those mountains. But you're right, it's absolutely beautiful.
Wow. So that is going to be a moment of unity, regardless of however you guys see the future of the United States.
Don't worry, we'll get into contention momentarily.
The fact that both of you guys do have a kind of understanding of what it means to defend the United States, I think that's a very important baseline to start from here. Now, as far as what exactly we're seeing with these protests, who they're being organized by, and all of that stuff, I want to first go to JJ. You've been on the ground for a very long time covering a lot of these migrant caravans and the protests and all of these various elements. So who do you see as being mainly behind this, and what is their goal? And then how are you finding the United States reaction to this so far?
I think these protests, the quote migrants, that's a wrong term. Illegal aliens in our country. I don't think this is not riots about that. This is trying to change the United States of America. They destroyed our sovereignty, and the way to this is a bigger game, if you will. This is a global reset, a global restructuring. It's not my words, it's theirs. You're seeing Western Europe fall because of the influx or the invasion of the Southern Hemisphere into their countries. But America has to fall in order to change this. And when you start to look at all the NGOs that are involved in this, they're tied to somehow socialism, Marxism, communism. The United States of America government, ironically, is funding a great deal of this. We're funding our own demise. And I think this is bigger than, I know it's bigger than the illegal alien crisis. However, that is the door that the Biden administration and the Republicans, because it's uniparty, they walked America through. We've had 30 million illegal aliens cross into America in the last 4 years. This number is correct. If you want to fight me on that number, then we'll just go to the politicians themselves who are liars, both Republicans and Democrats. And now we have ratcheted up to 21 million is now the new number that they are all agreeing on. plus the 8 to 22 million that they agreed on in 2019 out of a Yale MIT study. So we are somewhere in the realm of 43 to 45 million that the government has openly admitted to that are in our country. And I'm telling you that it's 50 million.
So far, Connor, any contention with the numbers before we go on?
I think we could quibble about that just because, you know, I've heard 10 or 11 being like the quote unquote official number. But also if we look at, you know, we've had the same border issue since I was a kid at minimum. We could probably trace this all the way back to 1965. So
Wait,
if
you were a kid in 19... Okay, never mind.
What's that?
You were... it was a bad joke. Go on.
Okay, so since 1965, I don't think the principles change, even if we're talking about the numbers. So if I want to say that it's 10 to 20 and he wants to say it's 40, I think we can have a conversation more about the principles underlying this issue rather than fighting over the numbers.
So I know that Trump recently stated that he doesn't really mind if we would have like the farm workers and the hotel workers and people of that sort, while the people that he's going after right now, at least as his administration says, is not so much the abuelas, it's more of the MS-13 people. Would that be correct to say?
No.
I don't think that's what he's saying. You, Connor, you think that Donald Trump is saying that?
Oh no, he said that yesterday. So hold on. If you kind of gave us an outline of what's going on. I'll give you a parallel outline of what I think is going on.
Okay.
Which is effectively, we've had a sexual revolution probably in the past 200 years, an industrial revolution and a sexual revolution. Sexual revolution, of course, taking off in the 60s, but we've started using condoms and all that kind of stuff within the past 200 years. And so what you see is demography within the entire planet is trending towards 2. And in the Western world, because it's developed first, we got there first. But our economic models are based off of perpetual growth. And so what I think happened in the 1960s, without consulting the American population, without consulting the Western European population, they said the way that we can stopgap the demographic collapse, I guess, of the Western world is through immigration, legal and illegal. And so we've used this to prop up our economy for decades upon decades. We've never talked to anybody. We haven't talked to our own constituent populations about it. But the reason why you saw Donald Trump cave in the past 24 hours is because we're so addicted to low-wage migrant labor that our economy is propped up by it. And if I had to guess what's going to happen, the economics is going to beat out any arguments about national sovereignty.
JJ, do you agree with that we are now dependent on this, let's say, lower underclass of people that are doing all of this work that otherwise Americans, even if they were to do it, there still wouldn't be enough of them?
No, I don't agree. I agree. Every part that he set up until that point, he's absolutely correct. This started in the 1960s under Ted Kennedy. He was the co-founder of all the, I mean,
the Hart-Celler Act?
Yeah, basically. So he was the man. If I went back and I had to pinpoint one guy that had his finger on everything, that was Ted Kennedy, of every immigration bill all the way up to his death. And the lie that we were told was exactly what Connor's saying. We are not going to flood America with third world peasants. We're going to keep all the people coming from Europe. And that was a complete lie. Right after 1965, we turned the spigot off of white Europeans, and then we opened up the floodgates of the Southern Hemisphere, Latin America, Africa, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what we're living in today. And I do agree, absolutely, I agree, that the powers to be have utilized the illegal aliens, both legal and illegal, as pawns in order to get wealthy. And they destroyed the middle class of America. I have no argument with that. The only argument I have is I disagree that our capitalistic society, our economy is dependent on third world peasants that are illiterate in their own language. Let me give you an example. And I did my master's on this. And I went back 10 years ago and looked at my numbers, and they're basically the same. We're actually a little lower. The number one segment of our industry, of our economy, that has the most illegal aliens in the population is construction. Construction of if I have 100 people working in construction, the population of illegal aliens is a little over 7.3. There's no way that our economy and construction crashes because I lose 7 out of 100 workers. There's no way. And then the service industry, 6%. Do you disagree with those numbers?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that, bear in mind, I'm using Google, so I would have to dig into the numbers. But estimates that I've seen have ranged between like 20 and 40% of the construction industry, and potentially even higher in agriculture. Also, I don't know if we have accurate reporting on this because I don't know where your reports are coming from. But just as an example, they raided an agricultural plant, like a chicken processing plant yesterday, and they found hundreds of illegal migrants who were working, basically cutting up chickens on a day-to-day basis. So I don't even know if we have accurate reporting on these percentages.
I would agree with that too. I would say but I'm saying ballpark for me. Now listen, let's say it's real. Let's say it's 40%. Do you think, Connor, do you believe that, let's take Tyson's chicken plant. Do you think that they're passing on that labor savings cost to us in purchasing that chicken? Or do you think they're devouring that entire labor cost as profit?
No, I think they're passing it on to the consumer. I think that almost any business, when you increase costs, I mean, bear in mind, I was raised Republican. I was raised fiscal conservative. The whole argument against taxation and tariffs is effectively that any cost you incur on a business is a cost they're going to pass on to the consumer. I don't know why that logic would suddenly flip.
No, but you're saying no. Let's say that I'm at Tyson's Chicken and I have budgeted $20 an hour per employee, but now because I have third world people that can't speak English, I'm going to pay them $10. But I'm going to show on my books that I'm paying $20. Are you telling me that $10 savings, Tyson's is going, okay, I'm going to decrease the price of chicken, or they're taking that $10 and putting in their pocket? You're telling me they're decreasing that cost? There's no way they're doing that.
But I think you're making a presumption. You're saying that there's even books to track. So if you said that there was some kind of reporting requirement where every single employee who worked in every single agricultural sector had to be shown to be on a W-9 or a 1099 or whatever, and that they had to list a certain wage or something like that, then maybe at that point I would be like, okay, yeah, there's probably some fraud here. There's probably some tax fraud and they're pocketing that, or there's probably some wage fraud and they're pocketing that. However, there's something that's kind of contradictory in your perspective where you're simultaneously saying that we have 40 million people. So you're estimating that we have double the official numbers if we're going on the high end. And then yet simultaneously, these people are only 6% of our labor force. 40 million people is, correct me if I'm wrong, we're in a country of allegedly 330 million. I would have to do on the math on that, but I'm assuming that's like 10% of the population.
Okay, 10% of the population. How many of them are women and children out of the 40 million? How many of the 40 million are not working because they don't have work authorization documents? That's basically the entire population that Joe Biden brought in. So this is my point. This proves my point. We're not talking about, everyone has this idea that people that cross the border are stronger, better workers, more efficient. No. They're not working. None of them are working, man. That this is a lie, and the ones that are working are under the table getting straight cash, so the employers, these giant corporations and small mom and pops, don't pay. There's no way. If I got, let's say, let's stay with that number of 40 million. I think it's 50 million. Let's just say 40 million. Half, well, I won't say half. Let's say 65% are men. 65%. So let's say, what's that? Let's say 25 million for a round number. 25 million. I will guarantee you, the vast majority of that 25 million ain't working. There's no way in hell they're working.
So this doesn't stand up to any kind of experience I have. So Central Florida is filled with construction. Central Florida is filled with agriculture. Florida is filled with plenty of restaurant and retail. These are probably the three main industries where we're talking about, illegal migrant labor. And these are filled to the brim with, people who work illegally, some of whom are people that I know. And so, the fact is I'll indulge me in an anecdote. Give me a little bit of a rant. Okay. So the way that I understand it from the friends that I have that are illegal immigrants is a lot of them are remitting, meaning that they're working here, but they're sending half of their income home. And
Correct.
their experience, as far as I can understand it, is they're coming here and they're busting ass and they're getting paid minimum wage or less than minimum wage in order to do work that Americans would charge 20 to 30 bucks an hour to do, because it's hard, it's hot, it's bad on your back, you know, all that kind of crap. And what these guys do is they have a single used truck that they use to get to work, and they live in an apartment. Sometimes it's a 2-bedroom apartment, and they live 3 to 5 men per apartment so they can save on money. And then they send half of their income home and they live on the cheap. And the whole point of this is they're not coming here to sit on ass. I don't know where the 50 million people who are just sitting on ass are living in the United States. They're coming here to effectively work their dicks off and then send half of their money home. And I feel like some of the stats that you're citing to me are a little bit contradictory, where I'm trying to understand your steel man, where we got 50 million people here, but they're also not working, but they also don't have the paperwork in order to get welfare, but they're also 2/3 men. I just don't see that borne out with most people's interactions with the quote unquote illegal migrant communities.
No, I think this is great. I'm glad we're talking about this, because if you cut the edges out of the United States of America, and that's where the majority of the illegal aliens are, you remove that. So you have this distorted view, as I did in California, that everyone's illegal and everyone's working. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. And I'll give you an example. I was there under Joe Biden's term. I was there as I was forced to release people into America. Nobody was given work authorization documents. You know what they were all given? A free cell phone, a debit card with thousands of dollars on it that was renewable. They had free housing in hotels across America, mainly in the outer parts of America. And they were there for at least 2 to 3 years until we started declining the money to the NGOs, etc. So I think this is a fallacy that everyone that here is hardworking. That's not true. They're getting state documents like California and New York, and they get free everything. Basically, as my colleagues tell me, as they text me back and forth, JJ, they get free everything and they get the maximum. They get the absolute maximum. I'll give you an example. California example. California has probably the largest population of illegal immigrants in any state. California is in the red, probably by $1 trillion, they say now, and increasing every day. Last year they had no water in the fire hydrants and not enough firemen. They spent $9.7 billion on healthcare for illegal aliens. So whatever this idea of that, there's this mass amount of people that we are depending on to have our economy go strong, and it'll crash without them. And they're all working. It's a lie. I watched it. I lived it for 24 years. Do you know, every time I arrested somebody in the interior, you know what? I have to go through their wallets to look for, weapons or knives or whatever. Every single person, even people crossing the border, I would find every welfare card you can imagine on them.
I have a quick question for JJ. If that is the case, why are the people who are in New York and Florida, like Connor was mentioning, why are they working? Why isn't every one of them just sitting on the dole and relaxing and listening to mariachi music?
I don't know. Why is there a hotel in New York City, just one of them? They have 50% of the hotels were contracted to illegal aliens. Why did anybody work or not work in Roosevelt Hotel? There's 5,000 people, and they were all getting welfare cards for cash. None of them worked. None of them. Am I saying? But I'm not saying that they're coming over to America and none of them work, and that'd be absolute asinine. I'm just saying the idea that they are all working is insane. There's no way. And then you start getting into the plus minus, right? So we don't quote, the theory is we don't have enough Americans to do the jobs we won't do. However, we're going to pay third world slaves slave wages, and then we're shocked when our social benefits are completely destroyed. Well, why? Because we're giving them to illegal aliens. We Americans are working our ass off to subsidize illegal aliens for the benefit of votes for politicians and cheap labor for for corporations. We're being hosed.
Well, okay. We have competing narratives, and I kind of don't want to keep presenting them necessarily back and forth, because I still think that we can talk about the problems and talk about the solutions. But just as an example, just off of a cursory Google search, okay, I'm finding that the last time California was running a budget surplus was 23, right? So
That was COVID money, correct?
I'd have to take a look at it. And then I would
It
also
was
have to
COVID.
check their surpluses and their deficits for the past like decade or two in order to see what's going on, because I think that you can say that there's specifically like a Biden-centric problem where maybe he ramped up the programs that incentivized people to come here that was even worse than what was going on in the 10s or something like that. We could get into the specifics. And then same thing with New York. New York was also like basically in 2024, they were running a surplus, at least off of a cursory Google search. This year, they're projected to run a deficit. So I would basically, in order to counter your factuals that you're saying that we're bringing people here, we're putting them on every program possible, they're costing the state tens of billions of dollars. We're not getting a good return on investment. This is effectively like these people, number one, a substantive portion of them are not working. And then not only that, but a substantive amount of them who are working are just depressing wages for the American worker. I would have to verify this by effectively seeing how much are we spending on billions of dollars for these populations to have whatever social services they're consuming. And then I would also have to see what are they producing, right? Because oftentimes what is cited for particularly legal immigrants, because I think the stats are a little bit easier, but oftentimes legal immigrants will be on welfare when they first get here because they have to have the time in order to set up. But I'm pretty sure there's some stat where it's like for every dollar of welfare consumed, immigrants produce like $1.7 or something like that. It's supposed to be like an economic surplus.
I think that is, I disagree with all that. In fact, in Google, if you Google search now how many legal aliens in America, they'll probably say 10, 11 million. I don't trust anything Google says. Let me just make sure that we're knowing that we're law too. Do you know it's against the law for a legal, not illegal, a legal immigrant to be on welfare of any sort? They're deportable.
I think it's going to differentiate between like refugees, asylees, all that kind of stuff. But anybody who's coming as like an applied immigrant to like start a business or work in a company or something like that, they're not allowed to consume government services.
So the idea. So let's look at this. This is the last 4 years under Joe Biden. I voted for Donald Trump in spite of the R, right? So I don't have anything in the tank for Republicans. They disgust me. This is a uniparty issue. This is, both parties have done this to us. The Democrats did on steroids the last 4 years. The idea that they are a net positive, there's no way I'll agree to that. In the last 4 years, per Joe Biden's own administration, they openly admitted to spending at the lowest end $700 billion on illegal immigrants in 4 years. The high end, as most people believe, is they surpassed $1 trillion in 4 years. There's no way that illegal immigrants that are peasants, that are illiterate in their own language, don't speak English, have no true skills, are going to produce over $1 trillion for America. There's no way. There's absolutely no one's going to convince me that. I arrested these people for decades, and I am telling you, the vast majority can't even pick up a pencil and put a mark on a piece of paper. They don't. It's not that they can't read or write. They can't even know. They don't even know how to use the right side of a pencil, man.
So hold on. So I think that if we're going to have an interesting conversation, then we should probably go even broader than we're currently doing. So let's try to summarize your perspective that way. Like I might not concede to all of it, but I want to understand it descriptively. Okay. So understanding your argument descriptively, what you're saying is the uniparty has allowed tens of millions of illegal migrants into our country. Their economic productivity is overstated. Their consumption of welfare services is understated. And as a result, these people are not that great for the United States. And so we're effectively selling ourselves a mythology of the noble migrant.
Yeah, in the very broadest sense, yes, that's true. Well, your statement of me of that's true. There's a plethora of other things: crime, cultural destruction, societal norms being destroyed. Yeah, there's a ton goes into it, but overall fraud. Yeah,
those are the things that I want to talk about. And then the other thing. So we kind of nailed down overstatement of economic benefit, understatement of social harms, understatement of welfare consumption. It's effectively like a migrant myth. And then
right. We add this? I'm interrupt you, but can we add this, because I don't want this just to be an economic debate. This is much broader. This is about the sovereignty of the United States of America, our cultural norms, our demographics. I did not vote. Listen, I did not vote for Black Americans to be displaced as the number one minority in America. I didn't.
Yeah. Oh, I just have vulgar jokes, but I can understand that this is a more serious discussion. So I'll try to keep it more serious.
But I want to have a discussion. I don't mind getting into the economics and stuff, but I want to have a broader discussion of how is this overall, how is it good for America to bring in all these people and dilute my nation? I didn't vote for it. Now, if you and I voted for this, Connor, if we went, the legal immigrants are 1.2 million allowed into America every year. If we said that's not enough, it's 12 million. I don't have to like it, but I have to acknowledge that has been voted on. We didn't vote for 50 million illegal aliens in America.
And also maybe being able to make certain predictions, like if we look at California's literacy rate in the education system, it's pretty abysmal. And there are even examples of people who I know who are from Colombia who are criticizing people who are from other Latin American countries, saying like these people, even the Spanish language they speak in is completely different.
Okay,
and it's like a bunch
you guys are gonna have to let me go wide with it, because frankly, like the arguments that I have, or the things that I have to say are not simple. You guys are grappling with like really complex concepts. So to even contend with what's being said, you're going to have to give me some latitude. Okay. So when it comes to I almost have to think about where we're at. So, and then you're also saying that they're underachieving academically as well. So they're not fungible, fungible meaning that you can't swap out like a North European American citizen who's been here for 300 years and then take some guy who just moved here from Guadalajara, 2 seconds ago. And then they're exactly the same person academically and economically. I understand what you're saying. So let me kind of present to you the alternative narrative, and then we could try to pull it apart, I guess. So the alternative narrative that I began presenting, that I think you guys kind of conceded was descriptively true, even if you assign malicious intent to it, is that we effectively have had a demographic bust in the Western world. We've technologically started using condoms, birth control, all that kind of stuff. And so as a result, I think the birth rate in the United States currently sits at 1.66, whereas demographic replacement is around 2.15. And so what's going on is we are not perpetuating at the same rate to even maintain a stable population. If we just let our population continue, we would actually decline in population. And so that kind of brings up a question. A lot of our economic models and our retirement models and everything, the stock market, all that kind of stuff, it's based off of perpetual growth. And so there are several ways that we could grow. And even if immigrants were at a reduced economic output compared to domesticated citizens, that would still be a way to grow the economy. Have more people come in, consume more services, produce more goods, produce more services, et cetera, et cetera. And also, I think one of the cool things about the United States of America is we do have an integrative effect. So I'm ethnically Irish. I basically descend from mud-living barbarians who spent 500 years throwing rocks at English people. There's plenty of like civilizational savage arguments against the Irish as recent as like 150 years ago.
Not if you talk about the Egyptian pharaohs, the redheads, but anyway.
That's a whole other thing. Let's face it, there was like ethno-religious bigotry against Irish immigrants as recently as the early 20th century. And so I guess my first question among many is, why wouldn't I just look at the history of Benjamin Franklin being alarmed about German immigration? All the complaints about Italian immigration, all the complaints about Irish immigration, which I can identify with, ethnically, and say, well, look at these people now. they're integrated. They're a part of the economy. They all speak English. They go after high achievements. They're all this kind of people. Why can't we repeat this same integrative process that we've done with other Northern European sects with Central American and South Americans?
Can we pause right there, because that's a huge
Absolutely.
topic.
I gave you
Okay.
like a 5-minute rant. So yes,
So no. These are great points. But what happened in 1924? 1924, we had an Immigration Act, the creation of the United States Border Patrol, and we basically went net zero on immigration from 24 to 65. Why? Because of the Italians, the Greeks, the Irish, Italian, on and on and on. They were not assimilating. And we became very balkanized as a nation, especially in New York and the East Coast. So we stopped everything. We did everything on quotas. And we allowed the country to, I don't want to say heal, but to have cohesion, to have the same language, culture, norms. Now, when we fast forward to today, do you know there is no immigration population that has gone backwards over generation? Not one, only except one. Hispanic Americans or Hispanic immigrants that come to America have decreased in education, decreased in financial output, savings. They are the only group of people. Why? Because they have not assimilated. You look at LA riots right now. Wait a minute, just one more point. You look at LA riots. The politicians and the police and everyone else has come out and said, you don't need to speak English in LA. You just speak Spanish. Everyone speaks Spanish. So no assimilation is happening.
Well, I would like to show off my conservatarian chud credentials right now.
Okay.
There are people who are born citizens, right? So they're quote unquote second generation. They're born to a Hispanic family, whatever. Would you be okay with or prefer? Like, they have a legal stance being here pending the Constitution being repealed, because I don't think you can get past the language of birthright citizenship. I don't think you can.
Oh, I totally disagree with you on that. Totally disagree. And we can talk about that later, but I totally disagree with you.
So yeah, I think it's an uphill battle on your end. Let's just presume for now, let's just run a hypothetical. Let's say that birthright citizenship stays.
Okay.
With those first and second generations, because often it's like the second and third generation that either integrate or don't integrate into society, would you be okay with an intentional pro-American, pro-civic institution, pro-constitution, pro-English, because I actually want a single language or like a preferred language within the United States of America, integrative educational programs similar to what you're saying we did in the early 20th century?
For all Americans?
Yes.
Yeah. What, we don't have civics. We don't have, no one understands that. Everyone talks about our democracy. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. Yeah, of course, I would have no problem with that. In fact, I would love that to be infused in our education and remove the transgender insanity out. Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay. Yeah. So the I might be a little bit more progressive or liberal in some regards, but the point is that, like, one of my frustrations with liberals, one of my frustrations with progressives, is the fact that they don't think that we need a shared narrative or a shared language or a shared history. And I think that's totally crazy pants. I think that a nation state and a culture, oftentimes, I just heard this today, is the results of like shared stories about history and where we come from. My objection, if I was going to give pushback to your side, though, is that I feel like there's oftentimes a pretense that Central Americans and South Americans can't integrate into our society because there's this like parallel narrative that does not mesh well with what's going on inside the United States. But I don't think that's true. The reason why I don't think that's true, and then I'll stop talking, is because if you look at Central America, South America, they're effectively the product of like three cultures. They're Native American, so this is technically originally their continent, so I don't think we can kick them out just for the crime of being Native American. Number two, they're Spanish, so they're European. They're swarthy Mediterranean Europeans, but they're still Europeans. And then they're Portuguese, which is an even swarthier Mediterranean European, but they're still European. And so when you're talking about like the differences between like a colonial Spanish project and a colonial Anglo project, it's not that there aren't differences, but they're parallel.
There are caste systems, though, in certain places. Like, for example, in Mexico.
Well, I wanted to bring that up
you
in
have
reference to the
yeah.
Colombians being racist to the Mexicans,
Yeah.
because I already know that there's the castizo, mestizo, like the closer you are to Spanish, the more white you are.
But their own
closer you are to
kings,
indigenous and black, the more black you are.
No, but not only that though. The kings of these various places, like the Maya and the Aztecs, the kings themselves said like, "Oh, we descended from the gods. We're the progeny of the gods that were ruling over you." And then this is a little discovery that I personally made. If you look at the works of like the Torquemada and the other monks that were following the conquistadors into Mexico during those times, the local stories they compile, and sure, you could say, well, all these monks lied, but there was more than one monk. They were talking about how we had like these tall, white, bearded dudes who came there and brought the systems of government and civilization, all that stuff back in the day. Not my words. These are the written accounts of these monks in the Middle Ages.
There's allegedly legends about either European and or African voyagers who made it to the Americas very like earlier, like centuries or millennia before. But JJ, I kind of want to repeat that question to you. Do you think that the Spanish and Portuguese colonial project of Brazil, Central America, and South America is irreconcilable with the Northern European colonial project of the United States of America?
No, and this is a great point. I'm glad you're bringing it up. Do you know how many of the Spaniard type illegal aliens cross the border? The ones that are educated and stuff? Zero. Do you know who I arrested ad nauseum? And this is in all the data. They're all the Native American, Central Americans, and Mexicans. That's it. The people with money are not crossing the border. If they did, they're going to do it legally. All we're getting are highly, highly uneducated, unskilled, illiterate peasants from Central America. And then to go further, just so you understand that in order, because I'm a big white guy, that I'm a racist, I want you to understand that I ran out of cell spaces because the nationalities within Central and South America, I can't put them in the same cell because they'll kill each other, because they hate each other. Everyone hates the Haitians. The Venezuelans want nothing to do with the Cubans. The Mexicans are tolerated. The El Salvadorians will kill the Mexicans, and on and on and on. So this kumbaya that we're bringing in all of this homogenous group of really intelligent people from the Latinos. I mean, Latinx. It's so grotesquely stupid. But I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying this idea that they're coming in and they're wonderful people and they get along. It's just America that's racist.
And look, before we go any further, I think it's important to distinguish between race and culture. If we're saying, well, there are certain things that they have no control over whatsoever, my whole point here is that we don't have to talk about race. We could just see, like, how would a person or how would a family act? How do they raise their kids? What are the values that they pass on? All that stuff. And then from there, we can make a judgment call. Because, Connor, like, you are right. It would be the best case scenario if we have all of these ways of making people integrate. But the question here is, if we throw out the racial thing entirely and just focus on culture for a second, can we make certain predictions as far as what are the values that will be passed on, even in the best case scenario of being raised to be much more civically minded?
Sure.
For generations onwards.
And JJ, indulge me a rant. So one of the things that I was prepared to do is, in this debate, because, I checked out your website prior to this debate, and, I was like, oh, he's going to be a MAGA chud, racist, guy, whatever. And so I was thinking of my talking points before I get into the debate, right? I'm happy this conversation is infinitely more fruitful than I thought it was going to be. But one of the things that I want to point to, though, is that homicides, relatively speaking, I'm sure there's homicides that we can't track. And we know that there's like homicide issues, particularly within drug trafficking gangs, sex trafficking gangs, all that kind of stuff. We know there's a huge homicide issue. But if you look at the United States of America, from 1960 to about 1995, there was like a massive uptick in homicides, probably related to the drug war, right? And then in the 1990s, we had the era of mass incarceration, which I don't view as a bad thing. I actually view it as a good thing, because if you look at it correlatively with the rise of video games, the increase in medical technology, and the era of mass incarceration, we've effectively cut homicides in half within the past several decades. And it seems like we're relatively stable around 5 per 100,000. And one of the things that was really interesting to me, I was also a law enforcement officer. I worked as a city police, and I had a predominantly historically Black neighborhood, I guess we would call it. And the historically Black neighborhood, if we had a homicide in the city, it was in that neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? I probably worked half a dozen homicides within the Black community because they had an honor community related to gang culture. The interesting thing is when this happened as I was leaving, the migrants came in and they basically took over everything. They gentrified the Black neighborhood. And what ended up happening, though, is we had a precipitous drop in violence. But the precipitous drop in violence was caused by two things. One, we just didn't have as many homicides because we didn't have the same level of gang culture. A lot of these people were just agricultural workers, and so they just weren't as into gang shit as everybody else. But number two, when it came to domestic violence and other things related to that, they didn't call police because they didn't want to involve law enforcement. And so for me, maybe I'm being a selfish gringo bastard, but I would almost prefer to have a quiet, self-contained, reduced violence Hispanic migrant neighborhood. Then I would prefer to have like the very aggressive gang drug culture of the previously historically Black community. So
before JJ responds, I know JJ, you've got a lot to say here. My quick take on what you were saying, Connor, is that it does seem like if we look at Mexico today as an example, there are these self-contained communities where everybody knows each other, but whatever thing is going on within the culture is something that has at the same time allowed for a proliferation of all these drug cartels to form. There doesn't seem to be as much minding of the store of your own country, despite what you said. And that's a big concern. But anyway, JJ, let me know what you think.
I do agree that less than 2% of the population, that's males, Black males from like 16 to 34. I think they're less than 2% of the population. They accumulate or they cause 50% or over 50% of the homicide murders. So that's a problem. The idea, though, that the Hispanic community or the illegal alien population, because maybe we need to go broader than just the Hispanics because that's how we get focused in on Mexico. 180 nationalities were arrested out of 195 nations in 4 years. We have 200,000 plus special interest aliens. Those are males that have been tied to terrorism. 200,000 of them were arrested and released into America from the continent of the Middle East, from the Middle East and the continent of Africa. Over 1 million Venezuelans, 500,000 of voodoo Haitians, 200,000 known Chinese, 200,000 Russians. So it's a plethora of everyone. The idea that Hispanics, for example, your example, have less crime than Blacks or less crimes than the average American. That's the ultimate thing from the left is they have less crime. They commit less crimes than U.S. citizens. I dispute that completely. But my retort always is, okay, let me just for the sake of argument agree with you. Is it still okay that Miss Moran with 5 kids was brutally raped almost to the point that she's dead, and the guy rapes her again and throws her into a ditch? Joshua Nungary, 12 years old, raped for 2 hours by 2 Venezuelan pieces of trash and then thrown in the garbage. You know, I could go on and on and on because I can state and show you studies of showing the endless rapes, the endless murders. And here's the thing no one really wants to talk about because it's dirty, is in Mexico, in Central America, in South America, what is the most prevalent thing ever that repulses Americans? And that's pedophilia. And that culture believes that a child can consent at 12 or 13 years old.
Sure.
And that's what's racing through our communities is pedophilia. But let me explain to you, and maybe you can verify this for the audience, Connor. When a person is arrested by the police and sheriff, and their data is inputted, that person's not going to tell you where they're from. They're going to say LA or something. And then because we don't know, the police officers don't have some drop-down box to put Hispanic. This is what they do. U.S. citizen, white. If I got $1 for every time that I arrested someone and looked at the FBI rap sheet and it said they're white and they're a U.S. citizen, I would have retired after my first year as a millionaire.
The good news is I think Florida might be a little bit ahead of the curve when it comes to demographic tracking sheets. Lucky for us, we actually have white, black, Hispanic, non-Hispanic. And so when white Hispanic entered the national discourse like a year or two ago, I was actually ready for it because there's a differentiations that we were talking about earlier in the stream, like pure-blooded Spanish Colombian immigrants to America or to the United States who came in with like a small business versus like you're talking about like the millions of peasant Mexicans who are mostly indigenous, right? Or they're Afro-indigenous. So a little bit of a different experience there, but I can still concede that within my experience of law enforcement, if there's a paperwork kerfuffle and there's a way to click 2 boxes to get the paperwork to close, people will click those 2 boxes. So what you said doesn't surprise me.
Well, I think maybe this I would like to maybe take this conversation just for a second. Sure.
I'm going to write a point down though, and I'll return to it. So I don't want you to be shocked when I return to it.
No, I just think that the really bigger picture here is, and like you're talking about a system to integrate legal or illegal immigrants into American culture. I don't have a problem with that. But my problem is, why are we as a nation jumping through hoops when we're $36 trillion in debt? And jumping through hoops, well, we can't make ends meet. Veterans are sleeping under bridges, and we are putting out money for illegal immigrants. We're burning cities down because people that have been proven to go through, quote, their stupid due process, which we can get into later, due process, they've already been ordered deported and they won't leave. And then they burn our cities down. They try to kill our cops. And I'm supposed to think on any level that there should be in my country. And let's go back to this final point that I want to make, and I'll turn it back to you, Connor. Sure. Our nation was founded on law and order. In order to have freedom and opportunity, you must have law and order. The irony of all ironies is these people cross the border and create chaos and take away our freedoms. If the Republicans and Democrats truly believed that Americans want more legal immigrants, then they would vote and they would take that 1.2 million and bring it to 10 million annually, 20 million annually. But they won't. And then my final question that I have is, and I always present this to everyone that I have a disagreement with. My question is, there's 4 billion people on earth that are poor, 2 billion that live in squalor we can't even fathom, and they are all coming to America. What is the number of 2 billion do you want to take into America? And we go around and around, and finally liberals will say to me, well, 20 million. I say, okay, 20 million it is. I'm the king. Snap my fingers. They get housing. They get everything. What are you going to do about the 1.98 billion that are trying to come in? They're at my door right now. And I break them down every time, and I say it out loud. It's not going to be painful. Say it. You need a wall. You need legal ways to come in. And I say, well, why is my wall morally reprehensible at 2 billion and I want to bring people in legally, but you are morally better than me because you want to keep 1.98 billion out? It doesn't make sense. And nobody can square that for me. Does that make sense?
I'll try. You're not, this is one of my, I keep saying chud, which is like a left-wing term. It's like cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller, where they just think that a lot of the right wing is not particularly, which chud am I supposed to be supporting again? Both of us, Grassroots, both of us.
Yeah, so there's a super chat from Grassroots Hegemon for $20. Thank you so much, Grassroots, who says, which chud am I supposed to be supporting again? Yeah, both. Absolutely, 100%. And by the way, guys, need those super chats and smash that subscribe button as well. Anyway, Connor,
I think to articulate a difference before I make my point. So I think that JJ and I probably have some overlap. I just think that he's more cynical about the world than I am. But that's easy for me to do because I was a city police who did policing for 4 years. You know, he did border patrol, and I forget how long you did it for, but I'm sure you bumped into the rough and ugly a little bit more often than I did. But let's not pretend. I'm not going to pretend either that I'm like a hug a thug guy. Okay, I'm not. So with the rapes and the homicides that you talked about, where I'm sure you have dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of stories of people who have been assaulted by people who did not technically have a right to be here. I am kind of a little aggressive with this, where maximally, I think that if you prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, you should be incarcerated. If you are proven beyond a reasonable doubt, you should be incarcerated. If you're proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to have committed some of these heinous crimes, like rape to the point of near death, like torture, like murder, all that kind of stuff, if it's beyond a shadow of a doubt, you should be euthanized effectively. And shadow of a doubt, I'm talking about like a higher evidentiary standard where we know that you did it. Yeah. And I would fast track capital punishment, where if we have these stories where, let's say that we have the DNA of an illegal migrant who rapes a woman within an inch of her life in front of her kids or some shit like that, and also beats her with a hammer and leaves her for dead, euthanasia. And he should be dead within 5 years, right? Like give him 1 or 2 appeals and then he's gone. So we do agree on integration. One of the other areas of overlap that we have, which I think I heard you say, is we agree on a secure border. So as liberal as I am, as progressive sympathetic as I am, there, in my opinion, there's no reason why what was it, like 10 years ago, Trump wanted a $25 billion wall and we somehow couldn't do it. And now, because of the backlash to Biden, we're now looking at like a $75 to $150 billion security budget. I feel like Democrats shot themselves in the foot on this one. And I agree with the secure border as well. There's no reason for us not to know every single person who comes into our country. I'm going to leave this point for last because it's a question, not a statement. And then I think the argument is whether or not it's benign or malevolent neglect. You and I were both janitors cleaning up the mess of society. And so I think that a lot of the cosmopolitans, a lot of the DC elites and all that kind of stuff, they look at the economic benefits of the slave caste. They look at the higher liberal morality of letting the poor downtrodden masses come to take a shot at the American dream. And that's how they sleep at night. So you say it's malevolent neglect. I think a lot of liberals and progressives in Washington, D.C. and New York, they see it as benign neglect. And then another thing we agree on is ordered liberty. You can't have liberty without some sense of order. That's another thing that we align on. So let me ask my question. Central and South America are famous for being effectively like narcotics-ridden failed states with human trafficking, drug trafficking, gang wars, ethnic conflicts, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of left-wingers blame the United States because we've interceded in Central and South America. I don't agree with the left-wing assessment of this history, because I think that if 5 guys from the CIA showing up with $5 million totally destroys your society was probably fucked to begin with, right? But you were talking about how we need to take care of ourselves first. Do you think that it should be an American priority to stabilize Central and South America so we eliminate some of the push and pull factors that incentivize tens of millions of these peasants to come to the United States?
No, it's not our problem. It's not ours. And because
we're gonna break on this very aggressively, but please elaborate.
Okay. I don't want another dollar spent outside intervention. I don't care if it's the Middle East, Israel. I don't want another dime going anywhere. I'm driving down streets and infrastructure is broken. Hospitals suck. Schools suck. Everything sucks. Our inflation's skyrocketing. Why should I spend $1 or print $1 out of thin air to help Colombia? Why? Because we're going to have, if that's true, if that's what the left wants or someone wants, if you're going to tell me we're going to go down there and we're going to stake our flag in there and make that America, that's a different topic. But if I'm going to go there, if I'm going to go there and I'm going to quote help, why they hate us? And let me follow up with this. And you're right on your assumption with the left thinking that America caused it. America has caused this. America demands cheap labor, so the cartels deliver it. America demands to have sex with children, so they deliver children. America demands child pornography, so we consume more child pornography in the world. We demand hard narcotics, so they supply it. I fought the demons called the cartels. I think they're soulless. I think they're almost subhuman. They have no regard for life. I hate them with a passion. I have no problem. If I was given the authority to shoot and kill them, I would sign up for that and just do my job. However, they're not the problem. If we didn't demand and order the products, they would just go and have supply lines to Europe. They're here because we want it. The idea, and I'm a MAGA guy, the idea that make America great again, if you believe in that slogan, then you have to believe that America is not great right now. And I agree with that. As a stone cold patriot, I agree that America sucks. I agree that America is the problem. America is in every war, has their fingerprint in every battle. America demands all this stuff and we're getting it. And then we turn around as these self-righteous SOBs and say, look at your country. Look how terrible it is, Colombia. Oh, you're a narco state, Mexico. Why are they a narco state? Because we demand you create the drugs so we can ingest it. We're the problem. We are.
Okay. This actually speaks to an earlier part of the conversation where I feel like we have a lot of descriptive overlap, but I'm infinitely more white-pilled than you are on the thing. I like the concepts of the United States of America. I like maximal liberty for citizens. I think that order is required in order to have liberty, but I still like freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, right to self-defense, private civilian firearms ownership, and limited government. I think these are all fundamental human goods. Not only do I like them for myself, and not only do I like them for my countrymen, I think these are universal human goods. And I actually don't really have a problem. Some people call this neoconservatism. I don't have a problem exporting this cultural aspect of America through soft power and hard power, even with all the conflicts and death and disease and oil wars and forever wars and all that bullshit. I don't have a problem with it. When it comes to fiscal conservatism and domestic stuff being more important, my frustration is I feel like people like you, who I do respect as a patriot and somebody who served your country and all that kind of stuff, the people who most often speak to you saying, we got veterans sleeping under bridges. We have homeless drug addicts who are wandering our streets. We have, all these issues in the United States first. We need to take care of America first. Mm-hmm. Well, as soon as these fucking assholes get elected into office, they don't reinforce social safety nets for veterans. They don't create drug rehabilitation, programs that are aggressive for drug addicts. They don't, rebuild our infrastructure. They cut taxes, which makes our fiscal deficit even worse. And so for me, the reason why I get frustrated with Republicans is because I agree with all the rhetoric, but the policy execution is fucking tax cuts. That's all they ever do. And so I get pissed off. You called them the uniparty. I feel like the uniparty has co-opted MAGA. And now when you have Trump tweeting out yesterday that, oh man, I didn't know that when we deported all the people who work in agriculture in hotels was going to affect the economy negativity. It basically proves to me that Trump is fucking toothless. He didn't believe in any of this shit. He used it as a talking point in order to get elected. I do have a couple more points before, I kind of yield the floor, so to speak. But I would like to invest in our infrastructure. I would like to take care of our veterans. I would like to eliminate our drug-addicted homeless and institutionalize them. American imperialism, like I said, I like exporting republicanism and maximal liberty. And then when it comes to cartels being violent and demonic, for one thing, I think that human beings, being a former Marine, I was brainwashed in boot camp, and I recognized that I was brainwashed, and I didn't care that I was brainwashed. I was ready to kill the enemies of the United States. I was ready to follow the orders of my superiors. If you would have asked me to club a baby seal to death on my graduation day of boot camp, I would have done it. I would have been like, yes, sir, and I would have grabbed the cudgel and smashed the head open of a tiny, cute animal. I would not have cared. And so when I see that demon in me, I wonder about the cartel kids, and I have to wonder what made them the way they are. And so I do think we should stabilize their societies, aid their governments, help them fight corruption, and help them fight the cartels. And if we have to do that by killing some of them, it is what it is. But until we kill the cartels, and stabilize the governments, we're fucked.
We're fucked because we have open borders. That's why we're fucked.
Well, I mean, I agree with securing the borders, but wouldn't you still have tens of millions of people slamming on the outside of the wall, even if we built the wall, but we didn't stabilize South and Central America?
So what? Let them deal with it. Why is that my problem? And you talk about cartel kids. Fuck those motherfuckers. You know, those guys were trying to kill me and my buddies on the border. You think a 15-year-old narco, I wouldn't put a bullet between his eyes and then eat a Jumbo Yak con queso and with a smile on my face? Absolutely. Fuck those people. Fuck them all. And fuck all of them as they come up on the border wall. You put giant turrets up there, and just like in the Night of the Living Dead or Fear of the Walking Dead, if they start breaking our walls, then we kill them all. How about we get to, wait a minute, how don't we get to this? Stop caring about everybody else and care about Americans. You talk about tax cuts. Yeah, I want tax cuts. I'm being taxed to the nth degree. If I took that $1 trillion, let me give you an example. I'll give you a real life example. I went and filmed a documentary called What is Trees and Traffic? And I ended up in downtown Philadelphia, Kensington neighborhood, which is basically a square mile of zombies. And I remember going through there. This is when we were at the height of the Ukraine war, billions and billions and billions of dollars. And I'm standing in the middle of hell. That's the only way I describe it. It is a deep level of hell I'm in. White, black, etc. Hell. And all I could think of is I don't have the answer on how to clean this up. But one answer I do have is that the $50 billion that Speaker Johnson just gave to Ukraine, I could figure out something to do with $15 billion to help these people. And that's what has to happen. If we, let's say that, Connor, let's say that we had 36 trillion in black, and I wasn't paying any taxes, and I was living my great life, and all the hospitals are good. My kids are going to school. They're graduating. Everyone's happy. No one's killing each other. We're all good, right? Kumbaya. Then I will talk to you and say, yeah, we can have a discussion on helping other countries. But when I'm in $36 trillion in debt, $210 trillion when you count all the entitlements, my response is no. No.
Before Connor responds, I want to make a distinction between the European front and the Southern front, if we're talking about South America and Latin America and all that. Because when it comes to the kind of soft power that a China, Russia alliance, and I'd say Iran as well, but look at them now, what kind of soft power they would be able to inflict on Europe and the United States going forward when they have more territory, when they have more power over the world, there are going to be gaps of this power that nations like the ones I just described are going to be able to use. Not to say that they'll be able to inflict physical damage on Fortress America, but they would piecemeal be able to influence a lot of these MAGA people, some of whom may be friends of yours. You may know people that are working for them right now, because people are people can be bought, and people can be highly influenced, especially when there's a lot of money on the line. I mean, look at Qatar. Qatar owns so many American politicians today in Washington. They practically run Washington, D.C., regardless of any of the patriotic sentiments that people in MAGA talk about. But the reason why I want to differentiate these two is that, JJ, even though I highly disagree regarding Ukraine, I do see something when it comes to South America where maybe it's not worth meddling in whatever's going on there right now. Again, there may be certain exceptions when it comes to, Hezbollah being inside of Venezuela with the gold mining, working together with Russia, all that kind of stuff. But that aside, I see a reality here where, yeah, these people are unfortunately really fucked up, and it may not be prudent right now for the United States to spend money trying to correct it. But in the long term, it may not be a bad thing to have some kind of a pan-Hellenism a la Alexander the Great when it comes to these nations, where it's not going to be like these dumb, naive Americans going into Iraq and then expecting, the Iraqis to have democracy and, not to have like this clan, kill the members of all the other clans because we put them in charge. None of that bullshit, but actually have like real Hellenist power that's going to run shit. And by the way, one last thing. I really hope that what we're seeing right now with Iran, hopefully falling, we will have an alliance between a future de-Islamized Iran and Israel, and they're going to be target wrangling the Middle East. And that, to me, is an example of this kind of Western-leaning Hellenistic culture that can take charge of shit. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Let me just ask one question. What?
Sure.
Tell me, and I don't believe there is one, but maybe that's why I'm asking the question. Tell me one Western nation that we've gone in and tried to set up, quote, democracy and the betterment of liberty. Tell me one that's worked.
Okay,
well, which Western? Okay,
JJ, hold on. Yeah, Lev, let me do it. JJ, I'm not saying this with condescension. I'm saying this sincerely. Europe, Japan, Korea, and all of those places, if you look at them, they're economically vibrant, they're free societies, and they basically they owe their liberty to the United States of America. And we're talking about tens of millions, if not like probably 100 million people who are free because of American interventionism.
Okay, and I will push and I will acknowledge that because I've been to both of those, not Korea, but I've been to other two countries. And you know what I saw? I saw beauty that I have not seen in America at all. And you know what I see in America? Because of our interventionism, spending billions of dollars to rebuild countries that killed our own men. You know what I see? I see St. Louis. I see Detroit. I see all these cities across America, Philadelphia, that are cesspools. And you're going to tell me we couldn't have spent some of our money on us? I don't agree. I understand I understand how Germany has come and Japan. I have no idea who the fuck said they killed our men, they slaughtered our men, and we're going to build their fucking countries back. I would have never I would have been the first one telling them, go to hell. Go to hell. I don't care what the future says. I want nothing to go to them. They killed my grandpa.
You're talking about Afghanistan and Iraq?
I'm talking about Germany and Japan. Why in God's name would I build their countries back?
Well, yeah, but JJ, this is where I feel like your vision is so limited.
The Soviet Union would have built them back otherwise.
I want to yap, bro. I love yapping. You know me. I love yapping.
Yap away.
Oh, thank you. So JJ, if we had left Germany immediately after we bombed the shit out of them, then Western Europe, I don't know about you, I fucking hate authoritarian communism. So all of Western Europe would have fallen to authoritarian communism. When it came to Japan, they probably would have been neo-imperial, because if we bombed them to shit and then we just sued them for peace, they would have kept their emperor and their imperial system, and they would have been neo-fascist, and they just would have stayed fascist. I fucking hate fascists too. They also probably would have held on to Korea, and they probably would have held on to some of their holdings in China, which would have guaranteed that there would have been another world war during the middle 20th century. And then I'm trying to think about Korea as well. When it comes to the Koreans, if we had just dipset, then Korea would also be another authoritarian communist fucking shithole. I understand that Vietnam was a fucking nightmare. It was a fucking nightmare. I understand that Afghanistan was a fucking nightmare. It was a nightmare. I also understand Iraq was a nightmare. I went to Iraq. It was a fucking nightmare. I understand all that shit. However, what I would say is there was this idealism with neoconservatism through the middle and late 20th century, where we thought, it's a Full Metal Jacket quote, inside every Vietnamese person is an American waiting to crawl out. And they didn't use the word Vietnamese person. And basically it's not true. But I think that you need to work with the people who actually do want to fight. So for instance, Afghanistan, I still have like 4 points I want to do, but I want to allow you to respond to what I'm saying right now. Afghanistan fell in like 11 days. Iraq gave half of their country to ISIS because 20 douchebags in white pickup trucks drove across the desert and took over Mosul. They had no will to fight. Whereas Ukraine has been fighting for 3 fucking years to the tune of 200,000 dead, and they've been doing it without a single American boot on the ground. They've just been doing it with our training and our weapons. So if those are people fighting for the free world, I think it's part of our moral duty to help them.
I 100% disagree.
Okay, this sucks.
Our
Wish
founding,
we could be better friends.
our founding fathers warned us about interventions. How much does this cost us? How much?
$1 trillion, but I want to address that in a talking point as well.
Okay,
And
there
also,
is no.
our founding fathers talked about non-interventionism, and then they immediately fought the Amerindian wars of North America, and then they immediately fought the wars in the Mediterranean against the Barbary pirates. So
yeah,
they were
because
kind of
they were
hypocrites.
destroying our people, right?
Well,
That's why they fought the Barbary pirates, right? Because they were destroying our trade and killing our men,
right.
correct?
And I think
Right?
we have entrenched trade with Europe and Asia.
That's fine. That's what I want, trade. But
Yeah.
are you telling me, as I'm looking at the cities across America, Chicago, where 50% of the children in Chicago school district are illegal aliens, 40 to 50%. School districts in Baltimore it's just a dead zone. There's no one they can't even read at any proficient level. I can go on and on from city to state to state to state. And yet we're so consumed with helping people that hate us. Why?
Yeah.
I don't want to.
I don't think Ukrainians hate us.
I will never agree to anything that we're involved in. Here, I just had this discussion with my wife, and I'm going to tell you my litmus test. Here's my litmus test. If I was president and it rested on my shoulders to go to war or not, right? I know Congress has to approve it. Let's just play this game. I said, here's my thing. My son's name's Joseph. He's 13. He has to be 14 in August, so 4 years he can go to the military. If I wouldn't send my son to go die, then I'm not sending your son. So if we're not in a war for the betterment and survival of America, my son's not going. Then no one's son's going. None. Lindsey Graham, I don't ask, don't tell, Graham, and those war hawks. Why don't you take your faggot ass to and die in
JJ, we're on YouTube. We got to be careful about.
Then pause me out. Yeah. I don't care. I'm so pissed off of our men and women dying for nothing, for zero. You talked about Vietnam. Go to Vietnam and look at the memorial wall. 50,000 dead Americans for what? I can go to 100 U.S. citizens.
Communism.
Oh God. I could go to 1,000 Americans right now, and 999.9 of them can't find Vietnam in the map.
Well, I think that's another problem. But the JJ, I understand your passion and your frustration, and trust me, I hear these things at dinner parties all the time with friends and family members. I think that having an all-voluntary military deals with some of the moral quandaries that you've talked about, because we're volunteers. We know that we're going in to potentially serve, to kill, and to die for our nation. And then number two, I would also say that Vietnam, while it was a very haphazard, kind of sillily executed war, I have no problems fighting authoritarian communism. And I just want you to indulge me in this for a moment. Vietnamese communism was still horrible. They were killing nuns, killing Christians, cutting out tongues, torturing people, assassinating South Vietnamese politicians, all that kind of bullshit. But right next door, there was an even worse example, which was the Cambodian Khmer, who was another communist revolution that happened almost simultaneously to the Vietnamese one. They wiped out 25% of their population through ideological struggle and mass slaughter. And so for me, if you're saying that these people are fucking, you were talking about the cartels earlier. They're demonic, they're inhuman, they have no empathy, they're violent, they're evil, all that kind of shit. Yeah. I actually have no fucking problem with American servicemen and servicewomen going overseas to kill those exact kinds of people in the name of other people's freedom and liberty. Because ultimately what happens when those people are free and they're free and they have liberty, like Japan, Germany, Europe, Korea, all those places, is they engage with trade with us. And they're thankful to us, relatively speaking, for their economic and social freedom. And I think that's a good thing.
That's a good moral argument as well as the practical one in terms of trade. But if we were to get even more practical with this conversation, JJ, if you can indulge us, would you be able to make certain predictions as far as what would happen down the line, let's say 10 years or so, were the United States to go full fortress mode, not bother with any of the conflicts that are going on right now?
I think you just have World War III again.
How do you see those particular wars that are going on right now?
Well, you don't think we're heading to World War III right now?
Compared to what it could be, absolutely the fuck not. We have spent we've been in World War III since the end of World War II, and the wars we have been fighting are to prevent World War III.
I bet if you went and did a true election and said, I want to know, America, do you want to continue to go to war or not? And I would bet you in the 90 percentile, people would say, we have had it. I'm tired of 21 plus years of war in the Middle East that got us nothing but a bunch of dead soldiers missing limbs, skin burnt off their body. No, I'm never going to be convinced that America needs to be the policeman. And it just doesn't work.
JJ,
It doesn't work.
JJ, so the thing with me is I'm a huge history nerd. And so there's things like Battle of the Bulge, where I think, like, you know, you would have to look at it, but like the worst day of the Battle of the Bulge, I think we lost, like, I don't know, it could be as high as like 200,000. I don't remember, but the casualty stats are fucking crazy, right? For a single battle in World War II. Whereas if you look at the Vietnam War, which was atrocious, by the way, 55,000 dead. And if you look at the War on Terror, I think it's under 10,000 with War on Terror veterans. And the thing about it is, I'm not trying to minimize what happened, because my friends, you know, people I know and served with are the people who lost arms. And, you know, dude, I remember when I went to a medical school, you know, for combat lifesaver, I basically had the EMT, you know, he was a doc for a Navy corpsman. He was reciting to me about how he had to go try to save somebody out of an IED'd vehicle. And he went to go drag him out of the vehicle. And when he grabbed him, his skin sloughed off his body. Mm-hmm. So he's just like, and I see the 1,000-yard stare. I see him like his nose is flaring because he's smelling burnt flesh again. I see like his broken-hearted, you know, voice because he went through that experience. So I don't say these things lightly. However, but what I will say to you is there's some element of geopolitical reality, which is petroleum is the lifeblood of the modern world. A third of the world's proven oil reserves are in Venezuela, which has to be cut with oil from the Middle East and North Africa. We are beefing with Venezuela. We get a substantive part of our oil from Saudi Arabia. That's why we're friends with them, even though they're authoritarian fucking dickheads. We're boys with now Iraq and Kuwait because of the same thing. And we antagonize Iran because they're hostile enemies to us. And they're so Saudi's sitting on a third, and then Iran's sitting on a third. So we're not in the Middle East and North Africa because it's just fun to kill brown people and it's just fun to let Americans die. We are in the Middle East and North Africa because petroleum is the lifeblood of the modern world.
Okay, well, why don't we drill here in America and be energy independent as we were?
We do.
Going into 2016. Excuse me, 2020.
This wasn't technologically feasible until the past 2 decades, though. Fracking is the only reason why we have a net positive energy position on the world stage, and fracking wasn't a technology until the last 20 years.
But to JJ's point, would it be enough if we were to go fully native in terms of our energy production? Would Fortress America, regardless of any of the other stuff for now, would Fortress America be able to work?
But then you get things like you know, JJ, you said something that I agree with, which is 90% of Americans are sick of war. I'm sure that statistic is correct. 90% of Americans also want zero decrease in their quality of living, no matter what. So when Trump says, well, maybe your baby girl only gets $2 instead of 20, I'm almost expecting a borderline revolt, because Americans do care about what they pay at the pump. Americans do care whether or not they have access to cheap electronics. Americans do care whether or not they have access to $20 Funko Pops. So if you ask some soy boy libtard pacifist whether or not he's ready to deploy to the Middle East and North Africa to secure America's right to petroleum, his answer is going to be no 99 times out of 100. But if you ask that same person, do you want to spend $100 for a Funko Pop, $5,000 for microchips, and $10 per gallon for petroleum? And his answer is also going to be fuck no. Sorry, I have to let a dog out. I'm still listening.
Yeah, I mean, how do we handle that situation, JJ, then, with these Americans that Connor talked about just now?
Why is it that during leading up to World War II, we were completely and utterly self-sufficient in every way? Breadbasket of the world, We created the most steel. Why did we have it? Why could we do it then and we can't do it now? Why does America need anybody? Honestly, why does America need anybody?
Because
and the answer is we don't.
Yeah, I could. Well, I don't agree. We are not sitting on vast oil reserves compared to other parts of the country. We're a net petroleum exporter exclusively because of fracking, but that's also a limited resource. Then when it comes to energy, there's a 200-year limit on nuclear energy. If we burned all of the uranium, then we would only have 200 years of uranium. Thorium might solve that, but we're not there yet. When it comes to cheap manufacturing, China just beats us because they have slave wages. And when it comes to complex electronics, Israel and Taiwan are a generation ahead of us when it comes to microchips.
Yep. And then but you're proving my point here. Why did we allow that to happen? Why did we?
Because we had allies.
No, because we wanted to make as much money as we could and destroy the middle class of America, and that's what happened.
I don't know if we wanted
congratulations,
to destroy the middle class of America.
Well, then it's a side product. And let's say it's a side product. Congratulations, you guys won. Now, what I'm saying is, I want to take it all back. And if there's pain, and there's going to be pain, I want to take it all back.
It's not a matter of what we want. It's a matter of what's realistic. So no matter how much you want it, will the Funko Pop collecting populace that Connor just alluded to right now, would they want it? Like, we have to be realistic
JJ, before you answer that statement, what I'm going to say is the neoliberals, people who believe in laissez-faire economics, and the neoconservatives, who are people who want to promote republicanism and democracy worldwide, they've been warning for a decade that Trump's policies, if implemented, will be disasters for the international economy and will also have knock-on effects when it comes to agriculture and construction. And what we saw yesterday from Trump's tweet is that a couple of neolib and neocon business owners called Trump and said, "Hey, you're fucking up my business," and Trump caved. And I don't think there's another Trump.
No, there isn't another Trump. What do I say to those business people is go pound sand. Go pound sand. You
just might also tell you to fuck yourself too.
Yeah, basically. And then I'll be self-sufficient. I'll figure it out. I don't care about you having cleaning ladies that you want to pay a third of the price for their salary. Go fuck off. I don't care. I don't care. Your bottom line goes down. I don't care. We're the country of America, not American corporations. We have been lied to and propagandized our whole entire lives. I believe in nothing and no one. I believe that Jesus Christ came down as a savior. Outside of that, I don't trust a damn soul. We have been lied to, propagandized. We don't live in a democracy. I'm not represented by anybody. My vote doesn't count. You allowed illegal aliens into America by the tens of millions. You've destroyed my social, economic, my life. I have to have conversations with my son, who's 13 years old, and talk to him about what's a transgender. What does it mean to take your penis and your testicles off? Why does that girl remove her breast? You know, my father never had a discussion with me about men having sex with little boys and dressed as women's costumes. You know why? Because we were somewhere near normal. So when you look at the totality of everything that we're talking about,
when
it's all
were you
connected.
born?
I was born in 69. In 69.
69?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me just finish this. I'm telling my son, we're having a conversation. We're driving back from Missouri, and I'm asking him. He's asking me about transgender and what was life like. I said, son, you don't understand. Prior to you being born, or even when you were 3 to 5 years old, if I would have had this conversation with anyone, a liberal, conservative, anyone, and said, in 10 years, we're going to have moms and dads ripping the genitals off of children, changing their sex. We're going to have men wearing dresses and fake breasts, dancing, reading you stories, being counselors in schools. We're going to have transgender congressmen that think they're women going into women's bathrooms. You know what those people would say to me? They would say, you need to be on lithium. You're out of your mind. They would throw me in the Alex Jones category, who ironically has been right quite a bit. And they would say, you're crazy. No, I'm not crazy. I'm absolutely right. So when you look at the totality of it, I don't want diversity as my strength. I don't want 17,000 different cultures. I want American culture. I want English language, and I want our societal norms. And I don't want to go over to another crap hole country and go to war. Here's the thing. Why don't we have trade? Why don't we stop bombing the Middle East and they'll stop hating us and we can trade? Why can't we do that? Can we try that?
Well,
We've tried the bombing the shit out of
did.
everybody, and it hasn't
Yeah,
worked.
we did. So Mossadegh, in the 60s and 70s, he was like the prime minister of Iran or something like that, and he wanted to nationalize all of the oil resources and kick British Petroleum out of the country. And so what that was basically them going socialist or going communist, and so they were drifting out of our orbit and probably more towards the Soviet Union. So what we did is we deposed him and we reinstalled the king as a benevolent dictator to Iran. And then that lasted for about 20 years where we had access to Iranian petroleum. And then after that, we were fucked because the Ayatollahs and the pro-democracy people and the Islamists had a revolution in Iran that fucked up a third of our access to petroleum. And in the 70s, there was like the OPEC boycott of the United States of America, where, Americans like my parents were lining up in order to wait for gas rations. That was That's because we didn't have leverage over the Middle East and North Africa militarily. So nowadays they wouldn't do that because we are so security intertwined that they're not going to turn off the spigot. But in the 70s, they turned off the spigot. And then, sorry, I'm going to let it flow, but I do have points that I want to get to before we wrap up.
Okay. Go ahead. I have about 10 more minutes. Go ahead.
All right, here we go. It's time for super chats, everybody. And we didn't even get to the fifth columnist, but that's okay. We'll do it next time. So it's an Israeli name here, which I cannot read.
It might be Kayil. I don't know if it's Kayil because I can't read Hebrew, but that's one of my friends.
Oh, maybe. For $10, says over here, JJ, why should Americans pay more for an overpriced product made at home over the same thing that is cheaper from abroad? Principle 1 of economics. People respond to incentives.
Well, why does China get to make products because of cheap slave labor and ship it over here because they don't have to pay for it and they destroy our market? Why? That's your answer. Why should I pay for some piece of crap made in China to destroy my manufacturing in America? It's simple as that. If if China, you'll allow me to sell my stuff there, just like Trump did. If you're not gonna open your markets, okay, then I'm gonna put a tariff on you to level this playing field. I don't have a problem with that. You want to buy your cheap crap from China, as long as it doesn't destroy the manufacturing here in America. But I'm not going to allow you to have access to my market, and you pay literally, or not even pay your slaves to undercut and steal from America. No, I am a stone cold America first. America first, probably from 1 to 1,000. After 1,000, I will start to maybe consider what's good for you and your country, because the world has stolen from us, and America has put ourselves at a disadvantage because we have gotten involved in everyone's life. You talked about Iran. Why do you think these people hate us? Let's flip it. Let's just flip it. What if Iran had control of the United States and got rid of our president and put someone else in that they could control? Would we love Iran, or we want to kill Iran? Let's look at Ukraine.
I just think people care more about oil than they care about principle.
Yeah. Just like the business owners are probably spineless people with a lack of spirit. They don't have the kind of spirit you have, JJ.
Or they're neoliberals and neoconservatives who think they're doing the right thing. The weird thing about Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, I think they're probably the architects of the Iraq war. But when you look at their history, they come from the intel community where they were like pretty involved in Middle Eastern and North African affairs for decades before they became a part of the Bush admin. And they were a part of the Persian Gulf War in 1992, where we kind of followed what JJ wanted to do. Show up, kick some ass, dip out, right? That's what we did in 1991. But what ended up happening, though, is America forgot about the war. But we did trade sanctions and trade embargoes on Iraq for a decade, and it turned Iraq into a shithole. And then because Iraq was on the verge of collapse, we went in and we kicked out the foundations of Iraq. So I think that if I talk to Donald Rumsfeld or Dick Cheney, there's a 50% shot that they're actually just like villains from Star Wars, where they're like, Saturday morning cartoon villains. But I almost guarantee you they have some bullshit speech that they've deluded themselves into thinking, well, they're like, well, my friends might have made a few $1 billion off of the Iraq war and tens of thousands of young Americans died, but we also freed a country and opened up a new market and all that kind of shit. I'm sure that's how they sleep at night. I do have a couple of points though.
I want to make sure. I want to make
JJ's
sure
limited on
because
time.
JJ has to go. The super chats, I must read them right now, and we don't
Sure.
even need to have like super detailed response here. So number one, this is from the Dashing Rogue 499. Homicides, you mean murders, deaths, or just bodies being found? So this one's for you, Connor. As far as what's going in Florida.
Homicides could be legal and illegal. They can be self-defense. They can be murder, all that kind of stuff. And I think that homicides within the United States are pretty stable, around 20,000 per year.
Okay,
So
this
I
one
include all of it.
from your Hebrew friend, $10. National Crimes Victimization Survey. Whites commit 52% of violent crimes. Hispanics commit 14% of violent crimes. JJ, how does this not make your hypothesis less probable than the converse? Are we talking per capita, by the way?
I'm not looking at that number and believing that's true. No. Rapes, assaults, murders lay solely the majority of it in the black community. The white community has now, if you want to look at proportionately, then those numbers are completely inaccurate.
I guess the question is where those numbers come from as far as, is it as thorough as Florida is today when it comes to distinguishing? Or
The main one would be the FBI UCR, the Uniform Crime Report for the United States. But I'm just going to say JJ doesn't believe the numbers. I guess I'm a lib cuck. I believe the numbers. So we're just not going to be able to break bread on that one.
Well, let's look at the FBI statistics just for this last year. New York, just for example, NYPD and LAPD, to two gigantic police departments. You know what they didn't do? They didn't submit their data to the FBI, as did 32 other major cities. Why? Why? So the FBI, if anyone believes FBI statistics, that come on, man, let's get into the world here. Anybody believe anything our government? This is the same government that tries to convince us that we had to take a shot called a vaccine and we needed 12 more boosters. This is the same government that funded Wuhan and told us that this is because people were eating bats. This is the same government that told us AIDS was because Black African males were having sex with monkeys. Yep, that's the same government. I don't trust the FBI, and if Kash Patel had any truth to him, any truth at all, he would follow through with what he's supposed to do, and that's destroy the FBI. But he won't do it.
Hashtag cash is coming. Over here, Grassroots Hegemon, $20. I mean, I have an immigration number. I'm comfortable with over 20 years, 1 million immigrants coming in. I think JJ has a point. Everyone should have a number. Yeah, Connor, you didn't mention the number when JJ was asking. Just like, by the way, JJ.
Oh, what's my number?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have a number. The number that I would do basically is JJ and I agree on secure the border. So we secure the border first. That's first and foremost. Number two, I would do effectively like a background check on every immigrant that's inside the United States. And then basically, if they haven't committed any crimes and they're socially productive, economically smart, they're putting their kids in school, they read them their ABCs and all that bullshit, then maybe we can give them an immigrant number like a green card or a work visa or something. However, if you're a piece of shit and you're, defrauding welfare or you're a minimal criminal, you get deported. And then if you're a violent criminal, you get incarcerated or killed. And then when it comes to the number of people that we take in from the future, I would solely rely on the economic needs of the United States of America.
There we go. And Dashing Rogue, $2. JJ is right. Childhood is a luxury narcos don't have. Just wanted to throw that one in here. And Grassroots Hegemon, $50. Thank you so much, Grassroots. I really appreciate your amazing.
He's such a
support on
fucking
this channel.
king. He supports my channel as well, and he's too kind.
Too kind, absolutely. It reminds me of Master and Commander, great movie. If you had to choose, if you were forced to choose which of these weevils would you pick, and he picks the bigger one and he says, so I have one. In war, one must always choose the lesser of two weevils.
This is a cute play on words, Grassroots being a fucking smartass.
All right, so over here, just a couple more, and then we're going to go. Dashing Rogue, JJ doesn't know about the Eurasian Empire. So again, that's like the whole thing about gaps of power and whether other empires would fall into place and what that means for the US. So just like Counterpoints was asked about what is the number, JJ asked you before about what predictions you could make were the United States to go fortress mode, would all the other world powers were to do from there on in.
Where
And how it
my
changed-
response
Yeah.
to that and everything else is, how's it working for us now? Is it pretty good? Everybody feel pretty great about the Afghan war and the Middle East wars and everything we are involved with. Everybody feels good about that in America right now. We're all doing good. Everyone's happy. I don't see a bunch of happy people. I don't see. I don't. Wait a minute. I don't see.
Sure.
I don't see the world isn't happy. I don't
People
see
weren't
it.
happy during the Great Depression as well, right? And back then you had the America First people that were saying, well, we shouldn't fight Hitler and Europe is none of our business, you know? So,
And it wasn't our business.
okay,
it wasn't our business until
but
we
then
got
the question
dragged in.
is, okay, what would then happen and again, this is a whole other conversation, but we do have to ask these what ifs. What if Nazi Germany was allowed to expand? What if the Soviet Union was allowed to expand on the world stage while the United States only cares about what's going on within its borders? These are important questions. I don't have the answer right now. We're running out of time. But in general, these things do have to be thought about when it comes to the trade-offs. But anyway, over here we are almost done. We have another dashing rogue, $5. Wants and needs are two different things. Why do you need big trucks or cool guns and gear? Just use an M1 carbine. Also, is Russia a Christian nation, JJ?
From what I hear, that it is a Christian nation.
It's completely degenerate, but again, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we'll open up some cans of worms here.
Yeah, the guy running the...
But ultimately, all that does not mean a bag of shit to me. All I want is secure border. I want to not have Americans murdered and raped by illegal aliens. And I don't want our children turned into sexual deviants because of our destruction of our culture and our norms. Is that too much to ask? I don't think it is. I don't.
Sometimes.
And if we had that, Connor, if I had a secure border and I had the people that I wanted out of my country, then you and I can have very detailed discussions on what do we do with our money? What do we do with our power? But when our house is complete and destructive and just destroyed, I don't think I want to talk about my neighbors. I want to fix what's inside my house.
My only counterpoint, because I know we're out of time, is just that the people who talk most, and I'm not accusing you. I think you're genuinely like a patriot who cares about your country. You're trying to do the best as you see fit within the country. My problem, though, is I feel like the politicians who play most to who you are use that rhetoric to seize power, and then they just cut taxes and they don't do fuck all about any of the problems that you're talking about.
And I agree with you, and I believe that's both parties. And what they do is if they cut taxes, they know it's not coming back to us. It's going to their pockets to enrich them. And I'll leave you on this because I have to go. Our politicians are corrupt to the core. How does somebody make $175,000 a year and within 6 years they're worth millions of dollars? Because they're corrupt. And we have a massive problem inside of our own apparatus. I believe we're the most corrupt government in modern history, period.
JG, before you go, this one final super chat is addressing you over here, $20. Grassroots Hegemon, again, thank you so much for the contributions here. No, JJ is wrong here. He is literally shilling to make the USA the world's second biggest producer on Earth, from making F-35s to making cheap T-shirts for China. We are higher up on the manufacturing ladder. Any final thoughts on that? And then we're going to go.
I don't even know what the hell that means. All I want is a secure border, and I want to make America great again. Outside of that, I don't give a shit.
There we go.
JJ, it was cool meeting you, man. So.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you very much. I enjoyed our conversation. Thanks,
Same
Lev.
here. I'm glad we got agreement on a lot of different things, regardless of the things that we, for now, disagree on. So, guys, once again, if you want to support the show, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, click the bell, patreon.com/breaktherules. My show, It Sticks Hexenhammer 666, has not been edited yet. It's not released into the public sphere yet. So if you guys want to watch that, go to the Patreon. And also the show with Jason Reziger Johnny is coming up probably in a couple of days. We're going to be talking about what exactly is going on with Iran right now. And I'm very much looking forward to that. So here is the link to Patreon. Go there. And also we have a Discord. So if you guys want to be a part of the Break the Rules community there, go to the Discord. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Where can we find you? JJ?
At jjcarrell.com. That's the best place, jjcarrell.com.
There we go. And Connor?
Counterpoints 40K is my main channel. That's where I do Warhammer science fiction breakdowns. If you want politics, just type in Counterpoints politics. You'll find a YouTube channel under that name as well. And then also Valor Media Network, VALOR, Media Common Spelling, Network Common Spelling. I'm live 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Monday through Friday.
There we go. And I just posted the Discord server in the chat as well. So guys, from myself, Lev Polyakov, Counterpoints, JJ Carrell, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
Great. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.